Well, good afternoon, everyone. Noel, John, Ken, thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for being here today. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to be here on behalf of Alberta and Canada and to be able to talk about our shared energy future. And I'm tremendously pleased after some time now to be able to be speaking to the Foreign Policy Association. I remember when I first became the Premier of our province, I think I came to New York for the first time within 7 or 8 days of becoming Premier. And I sat down in a room with David Manning, who's our representative in Washington, and with John Prado, and they said, you know, there's this organization called the Foreign Policy Association, and we have this idea. We have this idea that we should do exactly what we're doing today. And so I thank you so much for working so hard on this to allow us to have this discussion, and that you've allowed Alberta to be part of it, because I truly appreciate your willingness to serve as host and to bring us together to talk about North American energy independence, because it's a conversation that we need to have. And for reasons that have changed, as I mentioned, very dramatically, very recently, because energy independence, as we know, has always been a very interesting and a very popular topic in Canada and in the United States for many years. But for most of that time, the need to meet domestic demand reduced it to wishful thinking. North Americans looked out at a world that was developing rapidly and becoming increasingly thirsty for energy. And we wondered how we could guarantee our own security of supply without provoking instability or conflicts in other parts of the world. We looked out at a world in which a significant proportion of energy production occurred in countries that were run by governments that didn't live up to our own values. And we regretted that so much of our money was going to enrich those systems. Energy self-sufficiency was just a talking point, something that we could only aspire to until now. Today, North American energy independence is close and getting closer. And thanks to the discovery of new reserves, better technology, and a focus on innovation that supports those trends, it's quite realistic. Our way forward has never been clearer. The opportunities have never been greater, or the odds more in our favor. And we have to get this message out so that people, both in Canada and in the United States, on both sides of the border, understand how much they stand to gain from resource development. Because success depends on their understanding, not ours. Governments and industry need to maintain the social license to expand production. And we must ensure that people recognize that we're proceeding down the path to energy independence in a safe, a sustainable way, a way that benefits all of us as members of our societies, as members of our economy, and as members of our community. Our responsibility must match our productive capacities, vast though they are. And I have the utmost confidence that governments and industry can meet these expectations. 5 years ago, this kind of optimism was missing from the discussion on North American energy independence. We heard a lot of doom and gloom amid predictions of peak oil. Fortunately, North American oil production is proving those predictions wrong. The U.S. is experiencing a renaissance in energy development as new sources of tight oil are tapped. And I know from my trips down here, certainly, and from many meetings with governors, how hard states are working to provide the right climate to keep investment and crude flowing. American production is at its highest level since 1996, and it's projected to keep growing rapidly until 2016. By the end of the decade, the U.S. will become the world's largest oil producer. Surprising words 10 years ago. Churning out more than 11 million barrels per day, and that's something to be very proud of. In Alberta, we're also seeing increased production. Alberta is home to the world's third largest proven oil reserves with 170 billion barrels, most of it in the oil sands. At present, we're producing 2.5 million barrels per day, and by 2022, that will rise to 4.2 million a day. Canada is the single largest source for U.S. oil imports. So, as overall imports diminish, you'll be able to buy a larger portion of them from us. Your money will go to a country, as Ken has said, with the same democratic values, and a lot of it will return here, since the U.S. does receive 89 cents back for every dollar that's spent on Canadian goods and services. And this is at a time when Europe is buying expensive Russian energy with contracts that are tied to oil pricing, while China is building coal plants at an unprecedented rate because it has few economic alternatives. Now, North America has a major advantage, and that advantage will only grow as production expands and more jobs in sectors like manufacturing and petrochemicals return in response. There's no doubt that energy independence will bring us choice, certainty, and security in a world that's short of all three, and that makes it worth pursuing. However, there are even more compelling reasons, and the most important one stems from the fact that Canada and the US share more than values. We share growth and demographic destinies. And while Canadians and Americans may not know it yet, they're counting on the first to overcome the second. The search for prosperity is urgent because we're both facing population shifts unlike any that we've encountered before. North Americans are getting older in greater numbers, they're living longer, and they're putting unprecedented strains on critical services and on public spending. It means more beds in hospitals and continuing care centers, more money for advanced treatments that keep people with chronic diseases healthy, along with more for pensions and benefits, and help for seniors that are on fixed incomes and for those who have exhausted or perhaps never had savings. Governments have promises to keep. We have systems to maintain, and we have communities to sustain. And the only way to pay for them is by encouraging growth and investment. Whenever the prospect of fresh development in the oil patch comes up, it's met with complaints that business benefits at the expense of people. But that's simply not the case. We know that that's false. We know that the outcomes of growth and investment are jobs, taxes, and opportunity, and that they fund the services that people use every day. Public acceptance is essential for expanded energy production, and the easiest way to obtain it is to ensure that people understand what's at stake. We were talking earlier today about the fact that some time ago when I first got involved in politics, one of the people that was advising me on communications said, you can't start an answer to a question by saying that's a complicated issue. But this truly is a complicated issue, and it's one of the reasons we're here this afternoon. Because when it comes to winning approval for expanded production, how we attain energy independence is just as important as why. The science of climate change is settled, and our obligation to protect the environment and to minimize energy production's footprint is undeniable. Industry and government must live by those truths. Our commitment to responsible development has to be visible in everything that we do. Alberta, the home of the oil sands, has known this for a long time. We were the first jurisdiction in North America to require large industry to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And since 1990, the provincial energy industry has reduced greenhouse gas emissions per barrel by an average of 26%. Some facilities have achieved reductions as high as 50%. Producers are even working harder together to accelerate the reductions as part of a unique private sector initiative. Through Canada's Oil Sands Innovation Alliance, they're sharing intellectual property that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars to improve each other's performance. And that's not something that you'll see many other industries do. In Alberta, we're not just limiting pollution, we've put a price on it. We've put a price on carbon, and again, we're the first in North America to have done that. It's helped us to raise $300 million to support clean energy technology projects to reduce emissions further, to directly impact the carbon footprint. And even as oil sands production rises in the next 10 years, we've still found room to set aside approximately 5 million acres in that region for conservation. We're also bringing in a new monitoring system that's run jointly with Canada's federal government to uphold our commitment to being green, to be fully transparent, so that people can see the real-time results for what's happening with energy production in northern Alberta. And this is a system that boosts our ability to detect changes in the environment, one which is subject to external review by independent scientists, and which makes, as I said, all data publicly available, so that anyone, anywhere in the world, can access the oil sands performance for themselves. because there is really no room to compromise. Governments and industry must be honest about the impact of production, they must manage it, and we must follow through on our pledges to improve when we fall short. There's one last thing to understand about energy independence. Cooperating purely to satisfy domestic demand isn't enough. Our ultimate goal should be developing our hydrocarbons to their fullest potential, to turn North America into an export-oriented global energy superpower. The world is really starting to notice the surge in US and Canadian productive capacity. They're eyeing it because they need it. Demand for energy will keep rising for the foreseeable future as developing nations strive for higher standards of living. And that translates into heightened concern for the environment and an emphasis on buying verifiable, responsibly produced energy. It's a need that Canada and the US can fill. In doing so, we can magnify the positive outcomes for ourselves, which are more revenues for essential services, more investment in technology, and more jobs and growth. Alberta's oil sands are a central part of this picture. 40% of the world's total refining capacity for heavy oil is located on the US Gulf Coast, and we're determined to reach it through the Keystone XL pipeline. We're looking at other options too, possibilities that would see our oil move north, east, and west across Canada by rail and with new pipelines. Just 2 weeks ago, I had a very successful trip to New Brunswick. There's great prospects very soon of a reversal with respect to a Trans-Canada pipeline that would see us be able to transport west to east to Quebec refineries, perhaps to New Brunswick refineries, and to export to India faster than off the west coast of Canada. We're looking at other options, of course, in terms of rail, and we see industry responding to that need. Continued oil sands development is expected to lead to an average of 138,000 spin-off jobs annually in the US over the next 25 years, and increase American GDP by $521 billion. In New York State, as Ken has said, this amounts to as much as $863 million extra for the economy per year, and as many as 8,000 jobs created or preserved on an annual basis. It means more opportunities for New York City, for the world's finance capital, as companies look for investment to get the necessary infrastructure built. New pipelines and enhanced transportation links are critical, and if we're serious about moving large enough volumes of oil to achieve true independence and responsible prosperity together, then we need to come together to make the right decisions for our continent. To echo remarks by President Obama, North Americans should not have to choose between jobs, growth, and security on the one hand, and strong environmental protection on the other. It's up to all of us to nurture a deeply rooted partnership and to demonstrate that our vision is broad enough to embrace the environment and the economy for generations to come. This is what the Canada-US energy trade is about. This is what our friendship and our whole relationship has been about. We are striving to overcome the challenges of sustainable growth and development. And our best qualities, from your status as a world finance capital to Alberta's expertise in environmental and energy regulation, will help us to do that. The best in all of us will make our path to energy independence our path to economic recovery. It's a matter of putting the facts and the science into the debate so that everyone understands what we're fighting for. Thank you.